Welcome to the episode of Standing Out in the Cloud. Today we're super excited to be joined by Cary Portas, Partner Manager at Computer Centre. Cary's been in her position for 24 years, so you can guarantee that along the way we've got some really interesting stories and some points to raise and discuss. If you're interested in tech or just interested to hear about Cary's stories, definitely give it a listen. Let's dive in and get started. How did you end up with a role in tech in the first place?
So, my working career was not in technology at all. I started in retail, actually. I worked for John Lewis. So I left school. I was going to go to university, but then I met a boy and thought I'd take a year out. And I started working at Waitrose. And I was just sort of doing it was my Saturday job, so I just sort of flipped it into a full-time thing. And I thought, well, I'll just sort of save a bit of money, and I was going to go to New Zealand. That was my plan for my year out. And then I was going to go and do geography at Portsmouth. And then I met this boy, and so then that all went a little bit out the window. And in the meantime, I was working at Waitrose, and it was fine. And they liked me, and they were like, "Oh, she's not stupid. Let's ask her if she wants to do the management program, the John Lewis management program." So I did that. And I did that for probably 4 years, I think. And I moved around to different branches, and I sort of learned the ropes of how to deal with people and how to sort of manage teams, all that sort of thing. And there's loads of things about that basis that were really helpful for my then career in technology, because it teaches you about people and how to motivate people when actually you don't pay them an awful lot of money. They work really long hours, they work really hard. No one thanks you for facing up a yoghurt cupboard particularly well. You know what I mean? No one cares, right? Apart from you have some personal pride in it. But actually, in terms of like trying to motivate teams and things like that, it was quite a good test bed for sort of learning those skills.
Yeah.
But I realised that I'd always have to work weekends. I never earned any money. That actually there was a bigger, wider world out there for me. And I thought the way that the management program was great, but it was very structured, and they wanted you to be a certain type of person.
Yeah.
And I felt that I probably wasn't that kind of person, really. It was too rigid for me. And so anyway, I decided to sort of move into a different world, and I wasn't quite sure what. So I just went randomly to Blue Arrow recruitment, right, back in the day. And I said, I've got all these skills. I was working in the back office at the time, so I had a big set of safe keys. I used to do reconciliations, all the big safe, counting all the money up, thousands and thousands of pounds. I used to manage teams. So I had all these skills. I said, but I've never used a computer, really. I've used a dumb terminal to like input in data, but I've not actually done, and I don't know anything about Windows, whatever that is. So, you know, if you can train me, I'll come down on my day off. I've got Tuesdays off. I can drive down. I was working in Peterborough, and this was in Welwyn Garden because my boyfriend had moved. He moved, and I wanted to go and live with him down in Hertfordshire.
That's a different boy.
It was a different boy. We're just skipping over that bit. Anyway, he's no husband, so it's fine.
Okay.
And so, but I was like, I if you can train me, I will. I'm really willing to learn. And they were like, wow, okay. So I went down and I learned Excel and Word and PowerPoint and email. And then they said, okay, we've got you a job, and it's working at a South African consultancy business. And you'd be working in a team looking after these consultants. And I was like, okay.
Did that scare you?
Well, I didn't know what it was. I didn't really understand what any of it meant, really. And so that's where I started. And after a year, sadly, we all got made redundant. And then I moved to Computer Centre. So I went back to Blue Arrow and said, I've been made redundant. And they went, oh, don't worry, we'll find you something. And they found me this job at Computer Centre. And it was a really sort of, you know, again, it was just an admin role.
Yeah.
But it was working with the guy who ran the department, basically. So I was working with him and sort of supporting him. I sat next to him. And basically, he's quite lazy. I used to do most of the stuff for him. And so over time, I think I just quite quickly got a lie of like, actually there's a whole technology thing, and these people are really clever and they talk about this stuff. I've no idea what they're talking about, but I understand people, and I understand teams, and I understand how to ask the right questions, and sort of like, once I know the processes that I've got to follow, I can follow those, and that's fine. But if I think we can do it a bit better, I can maybe suggest, actually, why don't we do it this way, or why don't we do that way, and that kind of thing. And so I just sort of gradually got into it, and then I'd probably been at Computer Centre for about 4 months, and they changed the new guy that came in, the new boss, and we hit it off. And I think he sort of asked me, what's your background? And I said, well, actually, I did the management training at John Lewis, and so I've managed teams, and I've done all this and that and the other, but I'm currently doing expense claims and holiday forms, and I'm doing the post, and I'm sort of managing, like, admin processy type things. And he went, and then he came back to me and offered me a job and said, I want you to look after a couple of teams for me. I said, okay. And he said, one of them's the backups and restores team. So this was for Computer Centre's own branches, I guess, and offices. It was managing all of the backups and restores, so the old tapes, the data tapes that used to change overnight, like, in branch, because at that time it was a decentralized process. Also the antivirus team, and also the user IDs, the access control team. So it was 3 different technical teams, and I sort of went into it going, I know nothing about any of this at all, but I can manage people.
Yeah. How did they respond?
It was interesting, really, really well. Actually, I've still know some of the people that work for me then. Funnily enough, one of them popped up on a LinkedIn post yesterday. She's now some kind of director of operations in Nevada these days, and she runs a whole bunch of teams, and she's been doing it for 20 odd years, because I've been in the business quite a long time. And like occasionally you see these people that you worked with a long, long time ago, and maybe you were the first person that managed them or something, and then they've sort of gone on to do these other roles, really interesting jobs. But actually, the thing that I liked about it was that the technology is always changing. There's always new things to do, and there's always a direction of travel that you're going down that's sort of in line with whatever the strategy is that time. But I think we went through we're going to centralise everything strategy. So therefore, backups and restores and antivirus. How are you going to centralise those things, and move away from having branches where you have these little pockets of technology, kind of little areas. And it's like you sort of go to that, and then you sort of like bring it all in, and then they go, no, we're going to decentralise it again, and then you bring it all in again, and they decentralise it again. And so there's a sort of very cyclical kind of world, really. But underneath it all, you sort of over time you just sort of suck in all of this information and understand more about it. But I never ever had any formal training in technology. I never knew anything really about it. It's only through working in it, working with people, listening. I'm quite an active listener, so listening a lot to other people and getting them to explain to me, well, when you talk about networks, what are you talking about? What is it? And they say, oh, we mean switches and hubs and routers and this and that. And you go, well, what is that though? And then they go, okay, well, what we mean is, and so then you understand it, and then you go, okay, cool, like I get that. And then it meant that, my grounding was in our own IS department. It was in our own IT department, if you like, which I was, which means that I've got quite a kind of good baseline understanding of most technologies. I worked a lot in services always, because that was my thing. So I always worked I always ran the teams that were outwardly facing to the business. So the ones where we cared about the service we were providing, as a we're a service provider to Computer Centre, was our customer, really.
Yeah. And was there a lot of women in the business at that time? Were you one of the only, or was there?
Yeah.
And how did you find that?
Well, it's interesting. I was thinking about that before this, because I was trying to remember, and there was myself, service management. So again, it's more of the admin type stuff, and services type stuff, so more people-y type
Yeah.
things, not technical. And then there was another lady who's still in IS, who looked after the desk side engineering team, so the teams that would go out and fix your laptop. And then there was a lady who was quite technical, and she was our AS400 IBM mainframe specialist lady, I guess. And she was a little bit more senior. And then the only other women that were in any kind of management roles were service desk.
Yeah.
So honestly, I mean, when you look back, you think actually it was very stereotypical of the time.
Yes.
The women were in the admin jobs
Yes.
or in the services jobs. You know, it's all very people, process, picking up the phone. Oh, how can we help you today? Oh,
Yeah.
you've got a problem with this, you know, that sort of thing.
How was it for a woman for that time of
Really
their life?
hard, really, really hard. So I joined CC when I was 24, and by the time I was 28, 29, I was married. By the time I was 30, I was pregnant with my first child. And at that time, you know, it feels weird now, because I look at the company policy around maternity now, and the way that women are treated, you know, around all that stuff. In fact, funnily enough, one of my lovely colleagues in Germany has just gone off to have a baby, and she was able to work from home. She was able to work, you know, really flexibly. There was so much support, you know, for her, which was amazing to see. And if I compare that to my own journey, when I fell pregnant, I was working full time. I had to be in the office 9 till 5:30, Monday to Friday, without fail. And you know, you get your hour for lunch, you get your little morning break, little afternoon break. Everything was very regimented, always, and there was no flexibility at all. And I remember you were allowed 6 months off, and then you had to come back to work. And of course, that 6 months included the time running up to you going off to have your baby. So you tried to leave it as late as you possibly could, even though you were smuggling a wok, you know, and you were trying to kind of hold it together a little bit, and like, you know, panicking. And you know, all of that. And you just sort of got on with it, because you do. But I remember coming back to work and handing over my 5.5-month-old baby to practically a stranger at 7 o'clock in the morning, having just fed him, and go, bye-bye, Sam, I'll see you in 10 hours, you know. And then literally not being able to pick him up till 6 o'clock that night. So actually 11 hours. And them going, oh, he's had a lovely day. Oh, and he's eaten, and he's started to wean. So we're feeding him this, and he's looked at this thing, and he said a word. And you just, you know, you're thinking, well,
You've missed it.
I've missed all that.
Yeah.
You know, I've missed all these hours of time
Vital
that
time.
I could have had with him. Absolutely, that vital time that you have with your child, where you bond, you know, where you bond with your child. It's really important. And so, but because I was a manager, you were expected to be there to manage your team. And also there was at the time, and I think this has sort of changed a lot since then, but I guess back then it was the norm. You know, you're expected to be performance managing your team, that you had to be there to sort of oversee them like they were sort of unruly children or something. It was really
They
backward.
wouldn't do anything if you weren't there.
I mean, it's, I always felt that it was really wrong, but you know, that was how it was.
It wasn't, and it was widespread, wasn't it? I think that culture was, you know, that the women had the babies. They, you know, like you say, if you had a role that was more senior, you returned to work, and then you managed the babies there.
Yeah, and it was like seamless kind of, you know, well, I don't want to hear about your baby. I just, you know, you're here to work, and so there was no exceptions made at all. But I remember sitting in the car park, probably about maybe a year in or something to doing that, and I remember I got to work, and my best friend, who I'd known for years and years pre-computer centre, she also worked at computer centre, and she happened to be in on that day, and I think by that time we had mobile phones, and I remember I called her, and I was just sobbing in my car, and I said to her, I just don't think I can do this. This is just awful.
Yeah.
And she'd had a baby as well. And she said, well, like, where are you? And anyway, she came and sat with me in the car, and she just said, you know, Cary, like, maybe this is not worth it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not worth it. And, you know, I think if I could have done, I would have just resigned there and then. But, you know, you sort of think, well, I can't because I've got a house and a mortgage and, you know, you need your responsibility, and I can't give it up, you know. So, but it's like, you can't have it all. You felt like you had to choose, and
But as a woman, you have to choose.
It's really difficult. Yeah.
You have to choose running the home over running your ambition and want to succeed.
Yeah. And so actually, and in the end, I remember it came to a crunch point because I just got to the point where I was like, I can't actually do 5 days. I can't do it anymore.
No.
And I actually, this is absolutely true. I went into work. I phoned my husband and I said, I've just dropped Sam off. I said, I'm at work. I said, I'm going to resign. And he knew this was coming because this has sort of started with the whole breakdown with Helen in the car, probably a few months before. And he went, okay. Because he was just like, okay, I get it.
You're at that point.
I'm at that point, and I was like, I just can't do it. Because they turned down my flexible working request.
Really? Whereas obviously now it's...
Yeah, and they turned it down, and I said, you know, why? And they hadn't really given me a good reason, actually. It was just well, you need to be here to manage your team. And I was like, what are they, 5? You know, I mean, they're adults. Some of them are older than me. Do I need, what exactly do you expect me to be doing, standing over them, sort of?
Yeah, and it's changed now. Like, how do you think it's evolved since then?
Well, it's massively different now. You know, I mean, it's not the same
playing field at all.
No, not even slightly. Yeah. I mean, luckily for me, I went in and did my big speech to the big dude, the guy, the head honcho guy at the time, who looked at me like rabbit in headlights, like, oh, and sort of, I said, I can't do it. I can't do it. That's that. I'm out. And I left, and my boss at the time just saw my face, and he said, Cary, you all right? And I just went. Anyway, he took me in a meeting room and he said, what's happened? And I explained, and I said, I'm sorry, Steve, I can't do it anymore. I'm going. I've told Gavin, that's it, blah, blah, blah. And he went, and his face, like thunder, and he went, right. And he went, wait there. And he went in there, and he slammed the door behind him, and I could just hear him just going, what do you think you've done? And he just basically just tore a strip off him, because he was like, you're going to let someone who's really capable and really good and understands exactly what we need to do and is working really hard and you know, and is a real asset, you're going to let her walk out of the door because she's asking for a bit of time off. Guess what? Because she's got a baby she actually wants to spend a bit of time with. What is your problem?
Yeah.
And he, I think, made Gavin think about it, and Gavin came back actually and offered me a 3-day-a-week job doing something slightly different.
Yeah.
And so I did that instead. And actually, I've never worked full time since. I've managed to keep 4 days a week as minimum.
Did that set a precedent then? Do you think,
well, I think it did. Because I think just because of some of the work that I'd done, some of the projects I've been involved with, and some of the value that I'd shown, I think they recognised that. Luckily, I think I was really lucky. I don't think we give enough credit actually to some of the men like Steve who actually stood up for me.
Yes.
I think if I hadn't have had someone like him who actually really, you know, he didn't have to do that, but he did, because he realised that he could represent me. He could have a voice as well in that, you know, and he could sort of support, you know, more flexible approach, and that actually there's nothing wrong with a woman wanting to spend time with her kids and still be a useful, functioning member of a team or you know, part of the organisation. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And actually, I think people like him and others that sort of really, you know, they were on our side,
advocated and
supported us. And I think actually that's really, I'll never forget that he did that for me. And I think actually it was really
just what you needed
great.
At the time as
well.
It was
exactly what I needed.
Exactly
and it gave me some confidence, because it makes you go, oh,
Yeah.
He sees my value. He can see actually that I am doing a good job and that I can do this,
Yeah.
and that I have got some worth here, and that, you know, because you lose a bit of your identity a bit, don't you, when you become
Totally.
a mum, and you know, you sort of you're a bit torn, and you feel like, oh, what am I anymore?
You're going to be going through those emotions still as well, aren't you? From having the baby,
Yeah.
the guilt, all these other emotions.
Oh, the guilt is horrendous.
Obviously, you mask slightly at work, I think, and from a male perspective, there's still a job to be done, and we've now got to consider lots of other things. And I think that all of that together, with just having someone in your corner at that moment, is amazing.
It was massive, and I've been really lucky. If I think about some of the people that have influenced me or been my role models, as I said at the beginning, there weren't many women, but actually there were some really amazing men, actually, that were really great advocates and still are. You know, there's that diversity of thought is so important. You know, bringing together people from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different different ages, and particularly as women, you know, I think just seeing that evolution of women really emerging now in tech, and the fact that we even talk about it and promote it and want to get women and girls interested in STEM subjects and interested in what is a really very rewarding business, right? And technology is really interesting, and it's not just coding, and it's not just, you know, you're not just like beep boop beep boop, you know, kind of techie people. It's not at all. It's so much more than that.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that actually there's a lot of jobs, a lot of roles that are hugely geared actually towards females. To be honest, you know, think about you know, the massive possibilities around AI.
Yeah.
The massive possibilities around around you know, cybersecurity, right? You know, you need to be able to think in a different way. You know, and traditionally thinking about things in a very linear way or thinking about things in a very traditional way, it doesn't cut it anymore. You know, you need to have that sort of rich culture of different perspectives, right?
And you said about the AI learning as well. You know, you need to learn from every person's perspective and every angle, and I suppose that's where a female's thought process. And we spoke about it earlier in terms of how things like neurodiversity and you know is very much based on findings from male subjects. So AI is going to be really interesting for the future for women. How do you think, you know, we're going to encourage more women into the industry in the future? Do you see anything that Computer Centre may be doing? I know that there's a big drive towards women hires, female hires at the moment. And
there is. I mean, I think Computer Centre's really, I mean, we've all, it's funny because often when you meet people or you're introducing yourself as someone from CC, and then maybe other people also from CC on the call, the amount of years that we've all got between us, right? It's like, oh, I've been here 24 years, someone else has been here 27 years, someone else has been there 23 years. And like, we've all been there a long time, and there's a reason for that. And partly it's because of our culture, and it's because we are very, very, almost like a slightly dysfunctional family, you know? It feels like. But actually, we do very much, we're a people business, but they really do invest in people. And I think the investment that they made in our graduate programs, in recruiting and selecting people that are from all walks of life, and in particular girls, into our consultancy and projects schemes, into our sales schemes and our service management schemes. I mean, it's amazing.
So what would you say now to a girl who's wanting to get into this industry, knowing that they may have choices ahead around family, marriage, partners, all those sorts of things? What would you, if you could go back and give them a piece of advice now, what would you say to them?
I'd say there's never been a better time.
Yeah, I agree.
There's never been a better time to be here right now. Really, we've come so far, you know, and yeah, there's still more work to do, right? There's always going to be, you're always going to, you know, strive for things to be better and things to be improved and things to, you know, there's always going to be people also that aren't happy, right? That's just standard. But, you know, I'm a pragmatic person, And I think that everyone has value. You know, I think that women in tech is hugely important. But I think I think for me, the more important thing is just having that diversity of thought, you know, getting people that can think about things and look at things in a different way. And often that is because they're a woman.
Yeah.
It is because they come from a different part of the world, or they grew up in a different environment, or they're a different age, or whatever. Those things, bringing that together into a melting pot of ideas, you come out with some great stuff, you know.
Yeah.
I genuinely think that if there are people out there that are thinking about technology, don't be put off by computer science at school.
Yeah.
Right. The way that the education system is set up is still the same as it was 150 years ago.
Yeah.
It's antiquated. You know, I'd much rather that they re-looked at the curriculum and talked about technology in a different way in schools and taught it as integral part of everything else. And you know, I'd rather that they you know,
Maths and English.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
I've just been through this with GCSEs. You know, it's like, I think, why aren't you doing about personal finances?
Yeah, managing your bills.
Why aren't you doing about that?
Yeah.
It's crazy. But anyway, you know, that's for another day.
Another conversation.
That's a whole other conversation. But I do think that there's never any better time than now. And interestingly, I don't know if I told you this actually. So, as you know, my surname is Portas.
Yes.
And my sister-in-law is a lady called Cary Portas, OBE.
Ah.
And she's an OBE because last year she developed and launched it's a 6 steps really. It's sort of 6 steps in a girl's life, all around your financial future, right? And
wow.
There is a link here, right? I know it sounds
Yeah.
a bit tenuous, but there is a link. So she's a sort of specialist in the financial sector around insurance, really. That's her background. So she worked for a long time at KPMG and PwC, that kind of thing. But what she realised is that there are sort of points in a girl's life where they make decisions that will affect their financial future. And actually, one of them is at the point when a girl decides what GCSEs they're going to take.
Yeah.
And they might take the art route, or they might take the textiles, or something that they quite like, or sport, or childcare, or something like that. And that's fine. I'm not at all saying don't do that, because if that's really where your heart is, then fine.
Yeah.
But I would hate for them to be discouraged from taking the STEM subjects, only because one of the things that she says is the research shows that people that take STEM subjects financially throughout their life will earn more money.
Security.
Yeah, they have better job security. They will be more likely to succeed from a career perspective, right?
Have a career.
Yeah. Because those STEM subjects are the pathway to technology, to economics, to banking, to, you know, all of those things, right? And it's like, actually thinking about those things, I never thought about it in those
really
terms.
Interesting. Yeah.
Never thought about it in those terms. And she says there's 6. She talks about risk points in your life, but particularly for girls, when you get married, when you have children, deciding whether you're going to go back to work part time. All of these different things that you decide in life, and you sort of do them blind, thinking about in the moment. But actually, there are always knock-on implications.
Trigger points in your life.
Yeah, there are trigger points in your life.
Yeah.
And this is what she's got this whole kind of it's like a whole guide.
What's she doing with that now then?
So she's actually got a website. You can please go check it out.
Website address?
I don't know what it is, honestly. It's something like Securing Women's Futures or something like that. Yeah. But it's Cary Portas.
4 years, it sounds like you've achieved loads, and I'm sure like anyone listening will hear all of that and know that there's so many more stories that we could.
Many stories.
But there is a tradition on the podcast that we ask everyone the same question.
Okay.
What is your I'm laughing because I've got our own funniest moment, but what is your funniest moment from your career to date that you've ever experienced that you can tell on a podcast?
Oh, crikey. This probably was quite funny at the time. I thought it was funny. So on the going back to the ERP project that we did, it was obviously a big project. So there was maybe like probably 50 odd people, and we were all stuck in this kind of room, we called it the hothouse, and it has no windows really, and we were all kind of just in there all the time. And we had Deloitte's people from Germany, and they worked with us on this project. And we had a couple of them in our team. We had this lovely lady called Eva, and we had this guy called what was his name? Anyway, we had these German people, and they were really nice, but obviously they were a little bit stiff at the start. But we sort of got them going after a while, and it was fine. Anyway, by the very end of it, on the very last day, when we were sort of doing the go no go, it was all very serious and everything like that. So I was like, right, I got to kind of, I got to jazz this up a little bit, because this is everyone's too serious, right? And we've spent literally a year getting this to this point, right? So I went out over the weekend, and I bought one of those, you get the stick-on moustaches, right?
Yeah, the sheets of them.
Yeah, the sheets of them. And so the guy who is like one off the CFO, right? This is really, really senior finance guy, Keith, who's lovely. I made him wear a Super Mario one, right? I had a Magnum PI one. I made Eva have a Hulk Hogan one. Someone else had a Fu Manchu, like, honestly. And so we all wore these moustaches, right? And so they're all doing their work, like, whatever. And I had to go and have a meeting. With a very senior lady from HR who couldn't look at me for the entire thing, because I had this giant moustache that I was wearing for the entire thing. And she just kept saying to me, Cary, I can't look at you. And I was just going, why? What's wrong with me? She was just like, why? And so the funny thing was, when you just pretend that there's nothing wrong, and then it's sort of funnier. And
so you did a whole thing.
Did the whole thing, but then I came out, and Keith was in the room, and they used to call it the Party of Five, and it was basically him, the CIO.
It's really senior.
Yeah, like the managing director, like the CEO, actually, Mike Norris was in there. The CFO, so at the time was Tony Conifee, was in there. And this other guy who was like the head of the program, right? And they called them the Party Five, and they were literally all in this meeting room, and Keith still had his, and I was just like, oh no! And he just looked at me, and he's just like, and I just thought, you forgot you had it on, didn't you? You forgot you
just let him carry on.
To let him carry on.
Did they not say anything to him?
I think they must have done, but he was just like trying to brazen it out, like you do. And I was just like,
next time we have our meeting, we should get some.
It was amazing.
For a partner meeting.
Yeah.
But thank you.
It was so
thank
good.
You so much. That's been absolutely brilliant to talk to you. But what would be great is, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of girls, women out there who may need some advice. And you know, if you've got any questions, then please drop us an email, podcast@curiouservices.com, and we can pass it on to Cary.
Yep.
Thank you very much. It's been great.
You're welcome, Sarah. Lovely to chat to you.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you for asking me.
No, you're welcome.